Hi guys, it's Lisa Unger, and I'm here today, not with a Three Good Things episode, but with a special video version of Author Talks. So I'm here with the two amazing New York Times bestselling authors and also two of my favorite people, JT Ellison and Heather Gudenkoff. Hi guys.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well, doing well. We're missing our fourth Author Talks bestie, Mary Kubica, and she's not with us today, but she's, as always, with us in spirit.
Absolutely.
We're all, I think Mary, and also our kids all started virtual school over the last 2 weeks. So it's an extra fun moment for parents who work from home, especially creatives.
My hat's off to you. The cats don't go back to school.
No.
They just need their brushing and some playtime, and that's it. The rest of the day is mine. So
yeah. So we started last week, and it's especially sort of challenging for my daughter because she's starting her freshman year in high school. So it's really challenging.
That's a moment too.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an exciting moment in your life, right? To be like a freshman in high school, and it's a really challenging program that she's in. So it's kind of like she got all the this big sort of dump of really hard schoolwork and none of the excitement of starting a new adventure. So hopefully this will be temporary, but she's a trooper, and we're just muddling through, and we're just grateful that everybody's healthy at this moment. So
it's such a time. I have two in college right now, and they're back, but not living at home, and it's still hard as a mom, sending them off to their first day of school, and knowing it's not the same. It's not the way they'd hoped, but like you said, they're resilient, they're tough, and through it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of obviously, like, sort of, I've talked about this before. It's like when the mom brain is on, the creative brain is off.
So true.
Yeah, so like, I imagine even when they get older, it's still the same. You're still kind of worried about them, even if they're not if they're not home and they're out there, you're like worried, of course. So it's it's just kind of trying to find that balance.
Right.
And I know, JT, your cats are,
I know,
they're all consuming, aren't they?
They take up more time than you would imagine. They are our little darlings, and
and Jack too, you can kind of see him. He's
hello, Jack.
He's there having his nap.
And Lolo's sunbeam. I don't think I'll here.
Where is she at?
She's laying in on the floor.
What would we do without them?
I know.
So I think we had a couple of author talks topics that we were gonna bandy about. And I think the one that's sort of like at the top of my head right now was a thread that I was going to pull up from Jennifer Hillier and S.A. Cosby. Is that right? Is that how we say his name? And they were talking about sort of nasty mail that they that they had received from people, and how they did or didn't want to respond to those missives. And so I was kind of wondering, for author talks, just kind of putting it out there for us, and then any author pals that want to kind of chime in, is it ever appropriate or right, or the thing to do to respond to criticism that you get in your inbox, which is a little bit different from reviews. We've all been around the block a few times. We've all had the great ones and the bad ones and stuff, and you kind of, after a certain amount of time in your career, you kind of go, well, everyone's entitled to their opinion. But when you get something in your inbox and it's not very nice, is it ever okay to respond to that? What do you think, Heather?
I think it depends. I think it depends on the content of the note, the tone of the note. Want to engage somebody who, it depends on the tone. If they look like they want to have an open conversation, or if they're just being downright mean, what's the point? I had a situation once. It was with my first book, and I used a word, and I won't repeat it here, but it's an R word, and it's used to describe intellectual challenges, and I used and it was a really important part of the book that this character say that, and it really made the character. You knew right away that he was not a nice person.
Absolutely.
And, the reader was very hurt that I chose to use that word in my writing, and I felt bad about that, but I wanted her to know why I did it and why I chose that, because it's not a word I use, especially as an educator, and don't use that word. And I wanted her to know why I chose it and why it was important for the story. And, I'd even, when I was in the classroom, my co-teacher and I had written a letter to an editor about the use of that word in our newspaper. Mm-hmm. And I wanted her to know that I felt so strongly about not using the word that I wrote this letter to the editor. And I even, in a nice way, I wasn't trying to throw anything in her face about it, but just saying, it's not me, it's the character in the book. And it's important to know the difference there. And she was very gracious about it. She said, okay, that makes sense. I still wish you wouldn't have used it. And we just thanked each other and moved on. So I think in the scheme of the world, it was a positive interaction where we were both able to give both of our sides. Mm-hmm. How about, what have you run into?
Me, or did you ask JT?
Oh, either one.
Okay. I have, I've received some nasty emails over the years. I always sort of taught, I've wound up on stage a couple times with like Tess Gerritsen and Karen Slaughter. And both of those guys claims to have received like slews of hate mail and death threats and whatnot. And, I have never received that. And actually, I kind of felt bad. I kind of felt like, maybe I'm just not important enough to receive hate mail and death threats. But I have had, people write to me over the years. I had somebody, it's usually men, in my case, men like saying that they were worried about my psychological wellness or some such. And, I have to be honest that like I have made a point in my career of just not responding to negativity. People are entitled to their opinion of my work and of me. There have been, I have some very sort of twisted, deranged, and unpleasant characters within my novels, and those people are not me. And I think that if you are a reader of fiction, you should understand that the characters within a book are not the author. And if you don't understand that, then nothing I say is going to be helpful. So, but I understand that impulse, and I have had it to write back to somebody who has written something negative. But I generally do, for better or for worse, I generally do tend to quash it and just sort of, because I just feel like in some cases, I'm only ever going to answer once anyway. And if it's like a throwdown or like an invitation to engage in an unpleasant way about some topic in my book, then I just don't think there's no end game that I can perceive that would be positive. So I generally make a point just not to respond to criticism. Although I think in your case, that's a little bit different. I think if somebody wrote to me and said, I was hurt by the language that your character used, and this is why, I think I would have responded to that, because that's an important dialogue, and I think it's an important dialogue for people to have with each other just as people. And, you know, words are important and they matter. So I think in the case of yours, I probably would have answered as well. What about you, JT? What do you think?
I say, 99% of the time, I'll just respond and say, I'm so sorry you were disappointed. I hope I can do better for you in the future. Boom, done.
Right.
And then, of course, there's every once in a while you have one that, you clearly have to engage, and it is a reasoned and a dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And I did have one right when I started working with Catherine. I had a woman write me and just exhortate. I mean, it was this horrific, what an incredible racist I was. How could I possibly work with this woman? She was going to go out and tell the entire world what a terrible person I was. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Catherine is lovely. And I started thinking, she thought I was writing with Ann Coulter. Because I wrote her back and I'm like, I don't know where this is coming from. What? You don't get to call me the names that you just called me. I mean, I reacted immediately because, I mean, it was just vitriolic. And then finally pieced it together. And she was so embarrassed. She was mortified. And I'm like, well, you know what? You should be. Because you shouldn't be writing emails to people, calling them horrific names. Yeah. Just because you misread something. I mean, it just, oh gosh. Because, I called Randy and I'm like, look at this. Oh my gosh, what do I even do here? Yeah. And then we finally figured it out. And I'm like, okay, yeah, great, whatever. I wonder, the dialogue, you said, Heather, it was your first book. I wonder if we can even have that dialogue now, if we disappoint a reader in some way. If we can defend ourselves and try to explain it. I think that's a more dangerous moment in time to even try to do that.
I tend to agree there. It's we think we want to have, positive interactions with our readers. We want to leave them on, but express our honest selves, honestly. But it's such a time of discourse where people are very emboldened behind the computer keyboard. Yeah. And well said. And it's how much energy we want to put out there with those difficult conversations or those negative conversations. There's just so much around us. It's for now, like, at least I completely agree with you. Do you want to spend your energy on more than one conversation with someone, or any conversation with them?
Yeah, I mean, I think you only have so much brain energy, right? I mean, and if you're devoting a big part of your brain energy to parenting and you're devoting a big part of your brain energy to being creative, you necessarily don't have that much left over for negativity. And there are certain encounters that I think, that kind of recharge, and there are certain encounters that drain. I remember Oceans, one of my favorite teachers of my daughters, she used to say, "Are you a bucket filler or are you a bucket tipper?"
Oh, I love that.
I learned. I mean, such great wisdom from kindergarten, right? Like, there's pretty much everything. There's a book about that, right? Everything I needed to know, I learned in kindergarten. And I think that there are some people out there that genuinely might reach out to want to say, hey, something in your book hurt or offended me. I want to start a dialogue with you about why, so that I'm, in some sense, educating you about how you can do better for your readers. But more often, it's somebody who just wants to tear you down, who's angry, and for a variety of reasons, and you just happen to be
the person that day, the target, right.
The target that day. Yeah. And so that's sort of how I try to look at it. But I do find myself wishing, like, sort of beyond that, not necessarily, about my books, but just in general, I wish that there was a space, more space for genuine dialogue between all people, talking about the language that we use, because it's so powerful. Our words are so powerful. We know that as writers. probably more than anyone else. And, I think publishing, my experience anyway, over the years, that it's the most woke, inclusive, sort of loving and embracing industry that's out there, and I have always felt like, proud of that. Always felt proud to be part of the publishing community, because it is like, just by its very nature, this embracing of voices, imagining the experience of others, putting those words and those thoughts and those ideas out there. And, that's the gift of publishing and the gift of writing. So I do wish that there was, more space to have these kind of conversations, not necessarily in social media, not necessarily, in private email exchanges, but just in general, a dialogue between everybody saying, well, I say this because of this, and you can't say that because of this, and just have that kind of warm dialogue. But, I don't know if that's possible, but I wish it was more possible than it seems to be.
I agree.
We are in
agreement with each other.
We are totally, and too bad we can't like run that, here we go.
Yeah, run the world. Yeah. Maybe we'll just run the world, we'll run author talks anyway. So that's our contribution to world domination, or whatever it is we're after. So was there another topic that we had floating out there in our little exchange?
Did we have I was falling asleep the other night and this hit me, and so I pulled out my iPad and I wrote it down, and it's like a string of very nonsensical words, but I think what it was. But do you have a favorite book that you've written, and what is it and why?
Okay.
That's a hard question. When I've been asked that, I always say it's like having to choose your favorite child.
Right.
And
exactly.
I always say it's the one that just came out.
Yeah. It's hard. But I must say there are books that I think, like with any experience, that have left me feeling more confident or more engaged with my own characters that I've written. And so one of my favorites is Not a Sound, which was like 3 books.
Yeah, I loved that.
And I think it's because it was about a character that I really loved writing. And it was a character I wanted to write about for a long time. She has a profound hearing loss, and I knew it would be a challenge. And there are other topics within the novel that I related to personally, and that is always makes it for me much more enriching, enjoyable when what I'm writing about I can connect to.
Mm-hmm.
So that was probably the one for me.
What about you, JT? Yeah.
I think Lie to Me was a big one because it was writing about writers renovating a house and having fertility problems. That was just absolutely, that was fascinating for me to act. Everybody had always said, don't write about writers. Don't ever write about writers.
I read about writers all the time. We're the most interesting people.
That's my favorite thing to write about. I mean, it's just so much fun. A Deeper Darkness too was exploring Sam Owens, who's the medical examiner from my first series. It was her first spin-off book. She has really bad OCD, and I have OCD, and that was, I'm not nearly as afflicted as she is, but it really was interesting learning more about why I do some of the things that I do, and some of the, it was just fascinating. She washes her hands. She's a hand washer. I'm a hyper organizer. When things are out of their place, I get really anxious. So as you can tell, I'm doing things here and it's making me really, really, really uncomfortable. But it also taught me how to live with that and how to sit with that and be uncomfortable. And it's okay that nothing bad happens if I'm uncomfortable because Randy put the peanut butter back on the wrong shelf. You know, the world will not end. And it really did kind of break that free for me. And I'm not nearly as bad as I used to be about these things. You know, that could really wig me out a while ago. And now it's just like, okay, he's playing with me again, you know, bang, and put it back on its place. So it's interesting that, you know, we connect with the books that have so much of ourselves in them. What about you, Lisa?
Yeah, I mean, I really honestly cannot choose a favorite because I mean, it's sort of like what you say, like every book sort of in the moment of the writing comes from like this very deeply personal place. There's Jack. Comes from this.
Well, I have a favorite of yours. I have a favorite.
Do you?
Of yours.
What
No, Jack was saying that.
Oh, he thinks that they're all his favorites.
Stranger Inside, just totally.
Oh, thank you.
I loved that book. I loved it. Just layers, so many layers. And I love Not a Sound. I mean, that's, you know.
Thank you. But it's really difficult to pick a favorite. I mean, I do have favorite characters, and generally those characters just kind of stay with me, and they find their way into other books, like Jones Cooper or Eloise Montgomery. You know, characters from my book set in the Hollows. Even the Hollows is a favorite character for me, and you know, it eventually turned, like, even books that are not about the Hollows, which lately most of them haven't been. The Hollows always tries to get in, like it's always trying to find a cameo for itself in every book. so it's just like it's a place that I return to again and again. But for me, it's like, you know, the thing that, I'm sure you guys have heard me say this before, the thing that motivates me as a writer is that, you know, I really believe that I can sit down every day and be a better writer than I was yesterday. And that's the thing that motivates me. Like, I get up thinking, okay, today I can do better than I did yesterday. I really believe that. And so I hope that every book is better than what came before it. I mean, I've been writing, you know, my first published book, Angel Fire, published in 2002, but I started that book when I was 19 years old. So I've been writing novels since I was 19, and this year I turned 50. So I hope the book that I started when I was 19 years old is not recognizable to the book that is about to hit the shelves in a few weeks, Confessions on the 745. In fact, yay. It's on sale now. And of course I have it here because what author wouldn't? Here it is. Confessions on the 745. It's Galley, the early proof. And so I hope that everything I write is better than what came before it. And I know for a fact that every single book is the best that it could possibly be. You know, like, I run into the stone wall of my own limitations on every book. Like, I'm not saying they're the best books that ever were. I'm saying that they're the best books that I could write given my level at the time. So that's kind of how I approach it.
You're the healthiest writer I know.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Hands down. I mean, you're we've talked about this, but you're, the way you approach this, the way you think about it, the way your boundaries with it, everything that you do, you are just the healthiest writer I know. And everything, even everything you just said about it's the best that it could have been at the time. I mean, I finish these books and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've let myself down. I've let the publisher down. I've let the readers down. You know, I never have that sense. Do you, Heather? I mean, do you feel that kind of confidence, that radiating confidence in your work?
I don't know, but wait, let me just say, I don't think it's necessarily confidence. I think it's more just a recognition of my limitations and knowing that I can only do what I can do in any given time. And if I'm holding myself to some, you know, not just impossible, but fantastical standard of what could have been or what might have been, then it's just painful. And if you, and and you know for a fact that every time you turn your book in, your editor loves it, that your readers love it. Like, that, JT and Heather, and like that, that has to be enough. It's never going to be enough for us. And I think if you ever look at your own work and think it can't be any better, then you should stop writing.
Right.
I mean, because that's not the space you want to be in as an artist, I don't think.
Right. And I think too, it's also with each project, it's so different, and the that are thrown at you. I know when I was writing This Is How I Lied, it was the hardest book I'd ever written, and I kept running into these brick walls and tearing it apart and putting it back together again. And I think the biggest takeaway I have from writing that book is I did it. I finished it, and I it may not be my best work, but in that moment in time, it was the best I could do as well. So,
right.
Gosh, so there's the takeaway. It doesn't get easier.
No, nor should it.
It gets harder. Every book, it's a little bit harder, and a little bit harder, and a little bit harder to.
So I mean, like I don't think I ever approached the writing of a book with like, yeah, I'm gonna do this again. Like to me, it always feels like the first time. It always feels like the first time when I sit down to start a novel. And again, I mean, I think if it doesn't, then I don't know. I don't know why we would do it.
It would be complacency if it wasn't.
Right. Yeah. So I think we have about 5 minutes left. So let's talk about maybe do you want to talk about what each of us is reading right now? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Heather, you want to go ahead?
Yeah. I said it here. Okay. I just finished The Swap.
Yeah, I've been dying to read that.
Oh my gosh, it is really twisty, turny. It's just so well done, and the characters are completely vivid. It's one night of, I guess, debauchery gone wrong, and all the fallout that.
I actually love that. That's a great,
fascinating characters, and I'm getting ready to start the next installment in one of my favorite series.
Oh yeah.
Gamache series by Louise Penny. So very excited about starting. One's called All Devils Are Here.
Fantastic.
Yeah. How about you guys?
JT, what do you have going on?
I am reading. Ooh. Can you see it? Christina McDonald.
Oh yeah, that's next up on my list to read.
Oops.
Yeah, I can't wait for that.
Yeah, so that's her newest. It's in galley form right now. Obviously, I'm e-galleys right now. And I mean, I started reading it the other night, and I couldn't put it down. So I got a huge chunk of it done. It's incredibly engaging. She does an amazing job with just families. It's very, really has a sense for that, to put you in the suburban narrative really, really well. It's one of the things I think is her strength. So I'm excited. And I did just read again Confessions on the 745. Oh my gosh. It's not here, but great book. Absolutely great book. Love it.
Thank you. Thank you
so much. It's the same thing. It's that suburban world that just, comes alive.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited about it.
And the layers, there are just so many layers to it that you just unpeel this, and each new revelation is just like, I remember I just sitting with Lola while reading, like, a little gap.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. It's nice when you can make your author friends happy, because we're all like sort of, it's hard to really kind of lose yourself, in a story. So it's thrilling when you do, and to hear that your friends enjoyed it. So thank you so much. I'm reading, and I'm actually going to be talking to, on Three Good Things, I'm going to be talking to Poppy Gee. This is her. She's an Australian author. She's in Brisbane, and her book is Vanishing Falls. It's a really, really interesting mystery that actually reminds me a little bit of one of my favorite books, which is The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime.
Yeah, that's a
So
great book.
the main character here has, you know, she's a little bit of a she has some trauma in her past, and it sort of affected her in a deep way, and it affects her how she perceives things. And so her perspective on a crime, you know, and the way she picks up different details is, you know, a very big part of the story. So I'm really enjoying that. And then, so Maria Konnikova, whose book, The Confidence Game, was a big part of my research for Confessions on the 745. This is her new book, The Biggest Bluff. And it's a nonfiction book, and it's about how she turned herself from a writer writing a story into a professional poker player.
Oh, wow.
And it's absolutely riveting. Jilly McMillan mentioned it when we were talking about Maria Konnikova and The Confidence Game, and so I picked it up and I've been reading it, and it's absolutely brilliant and super interesting.
Oh, very cool. You know, we have a friend who's a writer and professional poker player.
Yeah, I think it sounds like a good idea. I'm gonna try to become a professional poker player too.
She really is.
Obviously, it can happen.
She's amazing. She's American Housewife. It blows my mind. She goes in with her twin set and pearls, and
that's amazing. I'm gonna do some more thinking about this.
Yeah.
Hey, well, you guys, thanks for joining me for our video author talks. We've been trying to get this off the ground for a while. We're sorry we didn't get to chat with Mary, whose book, The Other Misses, is now out in paperback. But next time I'm sure she'll join us, and we'll do this again really soon because it's fun. It's fun to hang out with you. Thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you very soon.